Peace, love, and Reiki. Welcome to Global Reiki Webinars. I'm Rachael Goldberg, and beside me, whichever way it's showing on your screen, you may see Phyllis Moto, Usui Shiki Ryoho Grandmaster. And we're here with Joanna in Australia, Angus in Great Bristow, Iris, Yulia. Hello, everybody. Uh, Isis is in New York City. Melanie's in London. Monica is in Germany. Irina in Italy. Hi, Carmen in Colorado Springs. Anne in the UK. Hello, Nur. I imagine you're in Russia. Um, Patricia in the Netherlands. Eileen in Connecticut. Eve Evgenia in Brussels, Ursula in Switzerland. So good to be with all of you. Hi, Shiva in Israel, Shana Tova, Lydia in Argentina, Lisa in Canada, Cheryl in Illinois. Oh, my neighbor. Hi, Paul in California, Marlene in Canada, and Shirley in Hong Kong. So, um, and folks are still coming in. Come on in if you're joining us sometime now in the future, watching this replay, either in our webinar jam replay or on YouTube. Welcome. We're so happy that you're here. Hi, Michael in Florida. If it's your first time here for a Global Reiki webinar, what I hope is evident to you is that you are part of a community that is truly global, of practitioners, people who are walking life with Reiki, in any form, in any way that's conscious through some lineage or practice of Reiki. And Global Reiki Webinars is a project that Phyllis and I began almost 3 years ago,
Wow.
which, yeah, is really cool. Phyllis spent decades traveling the world, working with Reiki students and masters and practitioners of all levels. And this is a way for her to share herself and her teachings with the global community. And it's really been such a journey for all of us to get to know each other in this way. And we've got an online forum on Facebook. We've got a group called Global Reiki Webinars. If you want to join the ongoing discussion over there and connect with this Global Reiki webinar in a tangible way that is ongoing, go on over to Facebook and join the group Global Reiki Webinars. We offer these free public broadcasts every 4 to 6 weeks, and do it on a donation basis. So in a moment, I'll post up a link for those of you who are with us live. If you click the button, it won't make you lose us. It'll open in another tab, and all monetary gifts and donations sent to us allow us to continue doing this, allow us to feel recognized and appreciated so that we can continue to do this work from a full place. And if you're watching a replay, there's a link down in the description, on YouTube. And we just really appreciate you being here and being in our community. Today, we are talking about the aspect of Reiki practice that deals with personal development. And Phyllis is going to share a little bit more with us in a moment. And actually, I'll just turn it over to her now to dive into the topic of personal development in Reiki.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me properly. So if you cannot, let me know. First of all, as usual, let's join together through Reiki. So if you could, I don't know, I always close my eyes so I can visualize you with me. And either put your hands on yourself, or if it's your practice to send distant treatment to us all, that would be great, to use Reiki for connection. Thank you. Let's come back. Slowly, slowly. It's hard to open my eyes. All right. Thank you. Um, well, today the topic is really is personal development a natural result of practicing Reiki? I think for the most of us, we all are aware of personal development or something like that. Like we might call it personal growth or um, uh, and I just brought up this question because sometimes in Reiki we are presented with things that don't feel so comfortable and really major life decisions that feel like they're disturbing the way our life was. And if you would tell me this, one of my first comments might be, "That's great," and people are not very happy about that because it's painful, emotionally painful, sometimes physically painful. It's disturbing the status quo, and and what I've learned about Reiki is that, and being a practitioner of Reiki, is that Reiki brings to us what we need, not what we want. Okay, so I'd like to give you a little history of what I've been through and how I've seen it. Maybe you can relate to this, and then we'll do a little shift at the end. In the early years of my practice, I realized that I didn't need healing on the physical level, like my grandmother. I didn't need to see an improvement on a physical level, but very quickly after starting to really practice Reiki in the 1980s, I realized that I had a lot of insecurities and a lot of beliefs about myself. Mostly how I didn't really measure up to any standards at all. And I had these questions like, why did I have friends? Were they really friends? Did they want something from me? And I couldn't imagine what that was. Why did I receive promotions at work? Why was I, in theory, a lucky person? Everybody would say, oh, that's really lucky that you did that. Or, isn't that great that you were able to do this? And it was really a puzzle. And when I began to teach Reiki, of course, we can always see other people's process much better than ours. So I just saw in the class how people changed and how they changed over a number of months and then a number of years. And it was amazing to me to see how people changed and developed, how people who were very hidden in the inside, and you just saw this person who was kind of normal. And then after a few weeks of Reiki and practicing on them, you just saw them sit up more and the light shone out of their eyes and they became more confident and more willing to really meet their life. And for me, this was something that Reiki brought them. In 1992 and 3, I wrote this article about my practice called The Four Aspects and Nine Elements. And the aspects were about sort of a broader picture of the practice, like perhaps what are the aspects of this practice? Is it only a healing, like to treatment practice? And I realized that when I wrote this article, which just came through me one day, that I realized that there was this part of me that was not physical, but was what I would call my humanity. And that this humanity, this beingness inside of my physical body, if you want to, this is my very simplistic kind of juvenile picture of this, that there were all these different aspects of myself. Of course, the Reiki and the treatments healed and allowed the healing process to happen on all these different levels without my having to choose, which was really great because I was unaware of most of the things that needed to be healed. And then there's the aspect of personal growth or development, which was about my kind of psychological makeup, my relationship with the world around me, with the people around me, with myself inside. And this really was my major focus, not consciously, but as Reiki gave it to me, for the first, I would say, 20 years of my practice. And then lately, and I'm nearing 40 years now, lately, my focus has become spiritual discipline. Seeing this process, this practice as a spiritual practice for me. It has the potential to be a spiritual practice for you. And what I mean by that in the spiritual practice is that this part of me, this beingness, there's this kind of human part of that. And then there's this part that's really about my being one with everything. And it takes discipline to choose that because we are so wanting for our own protection to be separate. So what I mean by being one and understanding that we are one with each other is that we are one with everyone on the planet. And that's pretty scary. So there are other aspects. One, mystic order, which I have a theory about, and I've had what I would call experiences of mystic order, and that is this piece where all of a sudden am having this experience of oneness, and that I do it because all the people in Reiki are aware that we are all one in that moment. And the healing practice, which is where I believe, well, just in my own viewpoint, that Hawaii Takata came into Reiki was she was seeking healing on a physical level, and healing on an emotional level, and healing on a spiritual level. She was extremely depressed, and that showed in her body about the sudden death of her husband, her dearly beloved husband. And she was a young woman, she was 30 years old. And this, and her going back to Japan and finding Reiki was one of the blessings that happened when when our spirit is really present. So I believe that the practice of Reiki opens these doors to us when we are ready for whatever it is that we need to shift and change in our life. So that doesn't really address the question about, sorry, is personal development a natural result of practicing Reiki? Perhaps we could look at it as personal development is natural in ourselves, is a natural process within ourselves, and that Reiki allows that process to be conscious, therefore chosen, therefore much accelerated. So perhaps you can look back on your life and see which of these aspects maybe described your first years of practice. And this recollection can assist you in seeing your own changes over the years and how perhaps you are moving from one aspect to another. At the end of this recollection for myself, in the last couple of days preparing for this webinar, I saw this process as a linear perspective, and I realized what my secret agenda was. If I develop enough, I will be likable, perfect, and have reached a goal of beingness. Like not enlightenment, but a goal where I don't get angry as much, or I don't worry, or I really find ways to honor my parents, for instance, or my teachers. And how would I do that? And to be able to hold money as a sacred part of my life, and so on. However, what I was asked one day in a workshop was, is there a goal for our Reiki practice? And this was kind of my goal. And I wasn't very conscious of it. So I only became conscious of it like today when I was writing my notes for this webinar. So I'm glad that Reiki gave me a kind of intervention, and and that was the intervention of a regenerative thought in my life. And what happens with this is that if we can see our lives from different perspectives, like our life is in the center of a circle and we just move to another part of the circle, we see our life in a really different perspective. But the other thing that I like doing is imagining myself kind of in an eagle view, where I see my life stretched out, and I can see my past and I can see what might be my future. And when I get into this perspective, what I see is we are all human beings, and it is our natural state as an organism to develop. And so, because we're human, we have a certain kind of consciousness. And I say certain kind of consciousness because I don't want to negate the possibility that other beings on the planet don't have consciousness, that maybe they have consciousness, it's just not a human one. And so, first of all, when we're children, our conscious development process is growing up, like to actually get taller, to be taller than our parents, to grow up so that we can do other stuff like drive cars or get on airplanes without assistance and so on. And there is also our accompanying physical maturation as human beings. But at the same time, which I was not aware of, there is a being part of my human body or within this human body that is developing. And sometimes it develops um, in a way that is not natural, is something that we find it's easier to please other people, like our parents, than be our natural self. And this is the starting point for me where Reiki comes in and allows us to become more and more our natural selves. This Reiki or any other spiritual practice allows this part of our development to become conscious and therefore more easily chosen. And now, the interesting thing is, there are lots of programs, is not the right word, but lots of ways where we can really pay attention to our physical practice, to our personal development, and be able to see it and choose it in many different ways. Um, so probably you've already discovered the best ones for yourself, and Reiki is one of them. And so perhaps the answer to our question is ambivalent, but uh, maybe we can shift the sentence around and say that practicing Reiki allows our personal development to become conscious. And as a result of this, we can see not only our own growing, but the growing of others around us. So that's my part of sharing for this webinar. And I would like to ask Rachael to start reading the questions, and then I'll answer them, and she can join me as well. Um, One of the things that was very curious about this particular webinar is that we had lots of people signing up, and we had very few questions. So I'm quite interested in this phenomena because I really count on your questions to develop the program and develop my own speaking during the program. And I didn't have that. So I've kind of on my own today. And I really, really appreciate those who did ask a question. And I'm wondering, Rachael, before we get into those, if there's any on the chat that we need to address first.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, it was really interesting with this topic because we have um, more people than usual registered for the webinar, and it may be that as our community grows, people have learned that if they register for the webinar, they'll automatically get the replay
Yeah.
sent after we do it. And those replays, when you register, you also get like the whole live chat that's happening.
Uh-huh.
So I think a lot of people are doing that. We had close to 500 people registered for today's webinar and only 5 questions that came in. I Did you hear what I was saying, but very quietly?
Very quietly.
Okay. So I was saying we have about 500 people registered today and only about 5 questions that came in. And um and it's curious. So one thing that I experienced when I began practicing Reiki is I sort of came to Reiki with a community of other students. We became very close after our first degree, and we're very close friends throughout the time that we were doing all of our training and working closely with our Reiki master. And there was sort of this understanding as things started to unfold and happen in our life, or challenges manifested, where part of our practice was learning to meet those challenges and see them through the lens of Reiki. And that this way of being in the world became an extension of our practice. It became an expression of our practice. And when we had that, um, had first started to experience that, people are saying they can't really hear me. Can you not really hear me, Phyllis? Or
Um,
it's fine when I hold it.
this was before you held your microphone, except
Got
for
it.
Anne. And
Okay. Um, okay. So I'll move into the questions in a moment. But I just was sharing sort of a reflection I was having, that when we started to have these experiences and just connect as friends and Reiki colleagues, there was sort of just this, oh yeah, that's part of Reiki. But I don't know that we had questions or conversations, but more like an acknowledgement that this is a natural part of the practice. And I'm curious if that is something that others have experienced. So those of you who are with us live can let us know if you sort of have this general understanding that personal development is part of the practice, or if you do indeed have questions. Keep them coming, because it's very likely that we'll have time for them. So the first question that we had come in advance was from Jeannie. And Jeannie said, "Hi, Phyllis and Rachel. How many hours minimum should one be doing self Reiki to ensure personal development? Thank you very much."
well, Jeannie, this is such a great question. And what's important is that I would say that the minimum would be a half an hour or 40 minutes of self Reiki. One of the things that happens when you treat yourself, which I feel is just an amazing process, is that you become both the the person being treated and the person treating. That means you are the object and you are the oh, I've just lost the word. And you are the observer. So we hardly ever are able to have that. Like if you give somebody a gift, you're not receiving the gift, another person is. But here, you give the gift and you receive the gift all at the same time. And I believe that in a spiritual practice, in a way, and moving through our own personal development, there are so many different questions that come up. So, am I worthy to give myself Reiki? And those of you who feel that Reiki is such a great gift, which I can assume is everyone, but I don't know, that am I worthy to receive this great gift? Am I worthy to treat and give this gift? Those kinds of questions are really important. Of course, the answer is that these questions are really from the relative world. There's no way that you can become worthy to receive Reiki or worthy to give Reiki because in the absolute world, you are Reiki. So the question of worthiness is only for our personal development to go from the relative world to the absolute and understand that when we do this, eventually we understand or we get inside of ourselves that we are Reiki. And that particular way of being is not just when we're like this, it's like when we're in our everyday world. And it becomes more and more integrated. So, personal development for me is not in our control. We, as human beings, we develop. And, we'd like to observe other people and say, well, I wish they would develop more. But that's not for us to say, that's for them to say. So in our personal development, we're doing it. And there's no minimum, except that the practice says 30 to 40 minutes of self-treatment is a very good way to start. And, there's some days when I practice much more than that. And there's some days when I hardly get my self-treatment in. And, you have to know for yourself. So if you're in a crisis, for instance, you might spend 2 or 3, 4 hours a day self-treating, and that's great. And as you sort of develop and have more confidence, or that part of you heals enough, then you can take an hour of that self-treatment and go have a relationship with somebody that allows you to see that there's another part of having relationship, and developing yourself through that. So I hope that was clear. Thank you, Jeannie, for the question.
Thank you. And I see we do have a
Rachel,
few.
Rachel.
Yep. I see we do have a few questions added to our queue that just came on in the chat. So I'll just add those after the
Okay,
ones that came in advance. So
okay.
our next question is from Angus, who I see is also here live. Hi, Angus. And Angus wrote, "Hello, I have been learning Reiki for a year. And whilst at first I experienced a beautiful opening, more recently I've been questioning my ability to help others as I feel my own needs, dealing with anger, compassion, empathy, and love, are taking precedent. How long is the journey, and do I have to chastise myself for feeling these emotions? Many thanks, Angus."
Another great question, Zane. I love your question. Um, Angus, this is such a wonderful milestone for, I think, almost all Reiki practitioners. And sometimes it happens after a year, sometimes it happens after 6 months, sometimes it doesn't, it happens after 3 years. And this comes to the question, who's more important, the other person or myself? And what we grow into is understanding that the more capacity and capability we have in our own self, in our own lives, to hold confusion, to hold dissonance, to hold uncomfortableness, and to not just go into anger or worry or shut down, as we might say, but to know that the world is a paradoxical place, and that there are so many times when we don't have the answer, and we really won't have the answer. We'll just see how this plays out, so to speak. So the journey is a lifetime, my dear, and definitely don't chastise yourself for feeling these emotions. Reiki is giving you the gift of feeling these emotions. And these emotions are going to grow and develop, and you're going to be able to have empathy for others because you will have felt it yourself and you know how that feels, so you can be more compassionate in how you address people. Um, you know, it's really interesting because I found myself as I rose to one, kind of a new level of understanding about my own anger. Then I often had, students and clients come to me, and they would have, vaguely the same issues, and then I would do another growth, and they would too. And then sometimes, and this was really beautifully expressed with one of my, as what beautifully expressed by one of my students, is that she said, "Well, my mother died, a few months ago, and every class that I've taught in the last few months, there has been somebody in the class whose mother has just died." And she said, "I didn't notice that before. I mean, maybe that happened, but why is it happening now?" And I believe it happens because Reiki and the world of how things happen is giving her a way to work through her own grief, but to also apply what she's learning to hold other people who are in that same space. And that's the process you're beginning, Angus. And it's a beautiful one. Not easy, but a beautiful one. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Luminita, and Luminita wrote, "Hello. Please detail the necessity of customer approval. Thank you."
Wow. Are we on the same question? Luminita, are you online? Is she online? Have you seen her?
I'll check. I haven't seen her in the chat,
Well,
but
I'm going to skip this question because I don't have any context for it. And I'd love if Luminita, you're online, because then maybe we can, if you could write more, that would be great, because I don't really understand your question. And I'd love to connect with it because um, questions like this really perk my interest, the
mhm.
ones that I really don't even connect to. So you're expanding my own capability of connection. Great. So can we go to Irena's question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question is from Irina, and Irina wrote, "Hello, dear Phyllis. How do you think personal dev- how do you think is personal development something that I choose to do and am agreed to in any given time, or something which is chosen for me being on the path of Reiki? Thanks for any reflection."
Right. Well, I might sound repetitive, but what I realize in contemplating this question for today is that it's in some way it's out of our control. We are a developing organism, and one of the things that is so important to understand about development is that the natural world is a really good metaphor. Like it's hard to imagine, but we were a seed at one time, like a seed of a plant. And when the right um, nutrients in the soil and in the environment um, become present, then that seed germinates and begins its developmental process. So um, it just develops. And one of the things that happens in organizations, for instance, is that when an organization wants to grow, it sets like a goal out there, like I want to have 1,000 people on my Facebook page, in 6 months. But that's actually not the way nature works. The plant grows and develops and goes through its own maturation process, and eventually it bears fruit, it flowers. And that fruit eventually will go through another process, and then the seeds, which it produces in order to regenerate itself, become ready for picking, so to speak. And that's the regenerative process, is watching our developmental stages and then how that produces regenerative effect in our environment. And so it's not about setting goals and in the relative universe counting how many friends we have. Is if I have over 10 friends, then am I a successful human being? Well, no, you can be a successful human being with 3 friends if you want. That's your choice. So the choices that we make are really about how to nurture that development of who we are. And in my looking back and in my observation of myself right now, I just see that Reiki, meaning universal life energy, uh, gives me whatever I need in the moment to take my next step of growth, of development. And, it almost always happens not at the right time for me. I say, oh, I'm not prepared for this. I'm not, I'm just getting used to this. So I don't know what to do with this. I'm at a loss. I'm confused. I'm scared. And that's exactly the right environment for development in human beings. This is what I have observed. So I would say that we choose to do this. And when we choose to develop and we choose to practice Reiki, we are choosing on so many different levels for ourselves. And when we choose that, it's a very powerful thing. And we are able to see what Reiki gives us. Like, I have friends of mine who are not Reiki practitioners, and there's a pattern that's happening in their lives over and over and over, and they just can't see the pattern. Or when they do see it, which is very momentary, they see it as something that they produced, not something that they could benefit by. And these two things are very important. So thank you for the question.
Can you say more about can you say more about a pattern not being something we produce, but something we can benefit by?
Yeah. So, well, I'll use my friend's example. They're 2 people. They're married. They're both extremely skilled and extremely creative in a very physical way. Like, they build houses and together, and they create spaces together, and so on. And they have, it seems like they have expectations that go along with that. So they move to a place, they have their expectations, they create a wonderful space for themselves and for other people to come visit, and to and they do their own creative arts to be able to support themselves financially, and they become very successful in a very short period of time. Once they hit this place of success, then they get bored. And, they look around and they go, oh, must be time to move. because for them, what they've created is not something, is that they've created it, and so now their job is finished. But for me, looking at it from myself, is that they created it. Now, what is the benefit of this creation for them? And I sometimes get very frustrated when they don't relate to my question or don't have this for themselves. But um, I feel like it's a kind of this for them. It's very clear because I'm an observer, right? So if I turn around and look at my own life, I know that I create, the same situations over and over again in my life. Well, why do I do that? Well, maybe I enjoy the creation of it, but I'm not willing to enjoy the benefit of it. And the benefit doesn't have to be having more money in the bank or having more friends or having more Reiki students. It can be a part of personal development that we stay and see that once our survival needs are met, once we can be at home, then we really get to do the real work. And I used to do this in therapy. I've been in therapy for probably 35 years. And uh, what I've noticed, and every therapist will say this to you, the best work is always done when you don't have a crisis. But of course, I really make a lot of therapy sessions when I'm in crises. But after that, I kind of go, oh, okay, well, now I don't have to do it. But actually, that, when I'm not fighting for survival, that place is where I can really go deep. And I've seen that before in myself. And it's been a very interesting pattern to just watch and try to um, choose, not to do it again. Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Um, and I'm feeling called to also share for anyone who, you know, has learned as a supplementary framework like the Western seven chakra system as a way of understanding the human energy body. This was something that I learned with Reiki, and then it took some work to recognize that it's not actually Reiki or part of Reiki, but is a very great supplement and complement to the practice. Um, the foundation, the base is that primal survival, safety, and security. And um, so all of these other aspects of our being, which are, it's a really great framework. Um, the chakra system that was, translated for Westerners by Carl Jung, um, that these other aspects of our being, deeper kinds of reflection or healing that can be done when we're not in that primal survival mode. It's because when that foundation is at ease, then we actually are able to go into these other spaces. I think this is also like Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
which is really cool. Um,
Cool.
so, our next question comes from Svetlana. Hi, Svetlana. And she wrote, "Thank you for this opportunity to communicate with you, Phyllis and Rachel. My development is mirrored to me by my partner in a greater degree. How to reflect the level of its development to date. In Reiki, more than 10 years as a master and Reiki, I always learned through partners most often?
Right. Um, well, Svetlana, um, that's a very human way of learning, is to watch other people and to see how your relationship with your partner has changed and matured over the years. And we'd like to, if it's, let me see, how can I say this really simply? Okay, so in some partnerships and in the way that we often um, learn how to create a partnership in our world today is that we learn how to compromise. So we learn how to compromise, and in our relationship and working with our partner, we often feel the need to compromise. Like, okay, so uh, I have this friend of mine who has decided that as a partnership, she and her partner are going to have one car because of their commitment to not contributing so much to the environmental aspect of having a car. And it benefits them because they don't have to spend so much money. But this car has become an interesting point of where they see in their relationship choices whether or not they're compromising or they're actually doing something that is what I would call a win-win situation for both of them. So in compromising, both people give something up. In the other way of becoming activating and restraining forces, there is a way to create the possibility for all of those activating and restraining forces to actually be recognized and to be included. So, where they want to go, when they want to use the car, and how they're going to satisfy the need that they have. For instance, sometimes one of them loves walking and they need to have a car to go up into this little mountain park next to us, so that the air is cooler and she gets to be able to walk in a better place. But the other person wanted to go someplace else. So, they really have to work it out so that no one feels less than. So, one of the things about uh, relying on your partner to mirror back your own development, or to actually is to be careful about this. The other thing is that in working with another person, whether it's a business partner, your life partner, your kids who are also partners with you, and so on, or your Reiki practice partner, there are always times when you're really going to need to stand up for yourself, where you really need to know what is the next step for your personal development. And maybe it is, I need to change the nature of this relationship. Maybe that's what's happening. And that's why personal development for me is really about self. And it's about our way, to develop ways to understand how you are different. So I have these two or three things that have followed me throughout my life. Um, One is a way that I use to deal with my anger, and my anger in this moment of this issue is not about anger. It's about using anger as a way to separate myself from somebody. it's not about just being angry because something, flares that up in you. It's about, you hurt me, I don't want to be around you, so I push you away by yelling and screaming at you. And I don't do that so often. And when I do it, I realize immediately I have to ask myself the question, where did I get hurt? Oh, so the other day I did this with two very dear colleagues. I knew that they didn't mean anything and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized that they were also trying to to communicate to me a need that they had, but they didn't know how to do it. And so I was frustrated in trying to understand them and felt less than, and and somehow that hurt me. I don't understand it, but I had the same reaction, and that piece will has stayed with me, and I'm kind of working on it inside in order to understand. So when it comes up the next time, because we often organize things together a lot, um, and we're all three very capable, strong women, that there's another way to respond, not react, but respond. And so I really encourage you, and I don't know if this is really what you meant, but I really encourage you to try to separate yourself from your partner, from your partner or your partners, and to really walk this path alone, because you will see your growth uh, change your relationship. Uh, Seeing it mirrored is just kind of creating a very similar cycle all the time. And if you have cycles that are similar in your relationship, it's time to really pay attention to who you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
That was the last of our questions that came in advance. I'm going to scroll back down the chat. It looks like our first question that came in today from our live participants came from um, Isis, who wrote, how does one get over feeling somewhat incompetent or feel not as capable as others may, although I'm a Reiki master and have been told I'm a great healer?
Well, okay. Lots of places to start from, and I just needed to figure out which place I was going to start from. Um, so, one of the things that may help you is the kind of addressing what is a Reiki master. So, in the early days, we asked this question a lot because um, we thought that we were experts in Reiki. We thought that um, somehow Reiki would just come through us and we would have all the right answers. And that's what mastery meant. And sometimes we were really frustrated, and the question was, you know, what are we masters of? Who are we masters? And so one of the things that became quite evident is that we weren't getting to be experts, even though we had practiced for 20 years. And recently, in going back to Japan and understanding kind of what mastery means to them and how they think about levels of competency, is this. As a master, we are students of Reiki first and foremost. And as a first degree student, we are asked to spend maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a week practicing. And if you are a first degree student and you practice more than that, then you're doing more than probably you were asked from your master. And then as a second degree student, you're asked to add another practice onto this first degree practice, which is, maybe 8 hours a week. But as a master, you say, I'm going to devote my life to this practice. So this means 24/7. Your whole life is your practice. That's what mastery means to me. It's not about being confident. We grow our competency because we see how we can apply what we learn to all these other different kinds of situations. But it's not about being an expert, for sure not. And being a great healer. Well, what does that really mean? And I don't want to take away anything from, what you've been told, because here's my guess. My guess is you're the kind of person who, when people come to you, you're safe. Somehow, who you are inside creates a kind of internal safety for others. And that safety allows them to be vulnerable in the place where they, for instance, need healing and need to be whole, and they can touch that place easily with you and allow Reiki or whatever the other tools are that you're passing on to them to grow. I believe that, so my theory of Jesus is that, because he was able to fully, truly love. I don't mean the kind of love that is in advertisements or the kind of love that we talk about with partnership. It's this thing that we call Reiki, actually, but it's this love that is this abiding knowing of oneness. And he was able to do that. And out of that place, the people healed or found their own wholeness. And he was not the only person who did this. I mean, there are lots of people in his history who have had this possibility. And so I just want to say that you can feel incompetent and you can feel not capable, but that doesn't influence how you impact somebody else's life. And if you have this understanding, then grow your capacity, grow your capability, so that you can share this gift that you have with other people, more and more people from different walks of life and from different places of healing. So you don't actually ever get over feeling somewhat incompetent or feeling not as capable, because that's a relative world measure, and there's always going to be somebody else who looks more capable, who feels more competent, and so that's never going to change unless you can move from this relative world to the world of I'm who I am. Even the parts of me that seem not very nice, somehow they're a part of my gift to the world. And and so you become more of a master because you know more of yourself. That's my response. And I don't know if Rachael has something she'd like to add.
I just really appreciate you and your sharing.
Thanks.
Yeah. So our next, um, we have I'm going to share a comment from Carmen. It
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
sound to me like a question, but
Yeah.
Carmen earlier said, I think that is very interesting to put it into perspective that practicing Reiki allows your personal development to become conscious. And we then become more aware of our own growth and the growth of others around us. Thanks, Carmen, for
Yeah.
adding that. I agree with you. The next question is from Yulia, and Yulia wrote, "Great questions and great answers. Thank you, everyone, and love to you all." I must have read that quickly. Thank you, Yulia, for your comment. Um, so, Pavel wrote, "Could you please tell me more about money and sacredness?"
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Because money is a very interesting thread that moves through personal development. You know, for instance, um, so I just need to say this because it's bugging me. So in the background of the room that I'm in my house, it's our guest room, and we are preparing to go on another journey again. So our suitcases are on the bed, and in the way the camera works, it was really different when we did our pre-program check. I couldn't see the suitcases behind me. But for those of you who wonder what is going on, they really are suitcases. So I'm sorry. I should have taken them off the bed, but I just needed to deal with that. Was
I'm sorry. I made you bigger, but it showed more of your room.
right. It's okay. You can show my room. I mean, I'm totally happy, but I just needed to say that. Okay, now I'm back to business. Um, you know, in our society today, money has become a way to somehow measure our worthiness. It's really crazy, but it's true. You know, and so people want to be wealthy because then they're more of a person. I mean, that's kind of what it equals to. It's a very weird linear thought. And now kids who are like 17 and 18 can become millionaires because they have a brilliant idea of a game, you know, and so they, are computer, totally computer um, geniuses, and they get this game out and they make, millions of dollars. And then what happens to their personal development? The question is, can money buy your way out of personal development? And I'd like to say no. So when people get into Reiki, and I've had a few of these conversations before, people say, well, you must be rich. because you're the grand poobah. And I say, well, but I'm not. And they say, well, why not? And I said, but because, money is about letting the flow of life flow through me. Um, and it isn't that I wouldn't like to have a savings account. It's just that the flow doesn't make it possible. And in the early days, I used to think, well, if I get to a certain part of my personal development, then I'll have more money. I'll have more students, and people will see me as a national speaker, and I can go out and speak to thousands of people at a time and all that. But that's never happened. And it kind of makes me feel like a failure, at some point. And then I just had more therapy and realized that, as with everything in Reiki, in our Reiki practice, Reiki gives us what we need, not what we want. So, I for my first money that I made with Reiki in the old days, when I didn't have a house to pay mortgage on and upkeep, I was single. I didn't have anything. I bought a brand new car. That's the last brand new car I've ever bought. Because financially, I learned how much a car loses value from driving it off the dealer's lot. And so now I buy used cars and I keep them for quite a number of years. And they look nice, and they're totally dependable. But I buy a car not because of the car that my ego would like to have, like what would I really love to have? I would really love to have a Jaguar, but they don't run very well, especially in the climates that I live in, which are very extreme. And in the old days, and they needed to be, tinkered with all the time, some little thing, and I can't. You have to be rich to take it to the garage, or you have to be a mechanic. So when I buy a car, I think of people who come to visit me and that I want to take them out and show them the beauty of my environment. And we go often for drives, and I love going to take people places. So my cars have to have a really comfortable back seat and big windows. So these are, we just, and so I got a great car, and I've got a wonderful house, and it's not particularly fancy, but it's totally enough for me and for my partner. And when I think, well, I need to somehow have more money, then how can I grow my money? How can I do that? And I can grow it by actually simply accepting what I have and knowing that this is what I need, and that if I needed more, Reiki would bring it to me. And that happens, weirdly enough. And it happens not from just sitting on my backside, but it happens because of the passion I have for my work, and how that develops, and then eventually how it flowers, and then eventually how the regeneration of that energy comes to me, sometimes in money. So we are, and this process of personal development is sacred. It's sacred because it has to do with this piece of us that is sacred. Sorry, I have these little bugs in the house right now. And the the part of us that's spirit, the part of us that knows we are one. Like I'm one with Donald Trump, I'm one with Rachel Goldberg, I'm one with you. We're all one. You know, we're all different facets of humanness, or different facets of whatever, the one. Um, that part of us is sacred and should then therefore be treated with consciousness and choice and connection. Yeah. So for me, this, if you can take this and work this in your life, it really changes your relationship with money, because money is what we offer another person. It's a part of who we are. So when I go to a gas station, I always use the same gas station. Not because it's a habit. I have a closer one, or I have a cheaper one, or I have a whatever. But it's because somehow the energetic of that gas station serves me, and I give in return what they ask. You know, I choose the stores that I buy my clothes in. I choose the places that I go to for food and all of that, you know. And the best thing for me for food, of course, is going to a farmer's market, which we don't have many of down here. And so I'm kind of sad about that, but I try to do as much direct connection as possible with the things that I need to live. And that for me is honoring this form of energetic exchange called money. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Would you like to take one more question?
Sure.
Yeah, there are three. So I'm going to read Carol's question, and for Patricia and Yupa, I will share your questions with Phyllis when we're done. And we'll see about answering those over in the Facebook group
Yeah,
at some
no
point.
problem.
Yeah. So Carol's question goes like this.
Okay.
I've been on a I've been on a spiritual ascension path for a number of years and was drawn to Reiki last year. I am first degree and my Reiki master is Elizabeth Omer Pellegrin. My question is, does self-development become enhanced with Reiki 2 for the giver and receiver?
Well, Carol, if you mean more prominent, I can say yes to that. Enhanced. So, first degree Reiki is the same as your second degree Reiki, is the same as a master's Reiki. There is no uh, better than in Reiki. Like, for instance, if I receive a treatment from a first degree practitioner, there's, you know, Reiki doesn't say, oh, this is a first degree practitioner, so I'm only going to give you, 50%. That doesn't happen. You know, it's Reiki. You get Reiki. And so when you're practicing, it's not about, is it better Reiki? It's that the question is, what does this ask of me? How much am I willing to commit? So in the previous, one of the previous questions, I said, you know, in first degree, I asked, my students just have a half hour self treatment a week, every day. So for a week, that's 3.5 hours, I guess. And then I want them to have one, hands-on treatment. That's sort of a bare minimum to have a Reiki practice, a personal Reiki practice. And added to that, in second degree, is a whole nother kind of practice. So it means that you're paying attention to your first degree practice, and then you pay attention to a second degree practice. For masters, They spend the day, they do first degree practice, they do second degree practice, and they do their master's practice. And part of that flows together. But what I've learned for myself is that it's really cool to just take a little assessment of your own life of Reiki and see if you're conscious of supporting your first degree practice, if you're conscious of supporting your second degree practice, and if you're conscious of supporting your master practice. For you, because you've had Reiki for a year and you're looking maybe at taking second degree, only take second degree if you are called to do it. Because it means that as a student of Reiki, your developmental part of who you are is asking for more. And it's not about more Reiki, it's about more time in practice. So uh, that's my answer to your question.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Yeah, you're welcome. Ah,
So,
here you are.
so
And my
we
suitcases
are
are gone.
we are going to begin closing, though we do have one announcement we want to make before we close with Reiki. Phyllis, would you like to make the announcement?
Sure.
Or
Why?
should I? Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, uh, Ursula from Switzerland is such a wonderful uh, supporter of global Reiki webinars and is a great personality. She has a lot of passion. And so she has really introduced and supported Rachael and I to really expand our idea of the global Reiki webinar gatherings. So we're going to we're going to try something different this year, next year actually in 2019, and we're going to have the Global Reiki webinar gathering in England and at a place that is hopefully really easy to get to. And we really are excited about being in Europe because, you know, a lot of you are in Europe, or a lot of you, it's easier for you to get to Europe than it is in the United States. And for the US citizens, it's a great time for you to fly across the Atlantic. And they're really cheap flights to London if you get them early enough. And to come and really meet each other and be a part of a global Reiki webinar gathering. Because, you know, this is great and it's much better than books and everything, but it's not as great as being together. So this is going to be on June
7th to 9th. I'm just pulling up my calendar to double check
something like that.
that.
We're
So
not.
it's June of 2019, and the arriving on Thursday, June 6th through
Yeah,
Sunday, June 9th.
yeah,
And as we have our confirmations and are able to make information and registration available to you, we will definitely communicate to you, our community, in the Facebook group. If you've ever been on one of these webinars live, you are on our email list. So we'll send out an email announcement when we have information. And if you are just watching on YouTube, join us either of those if you want to get involved. But we'll also in future webinars announce those details as we have them. So
great,
we're excited to be with more of you in person. And
great,
I'm excited because I've never been to that side of, uh, I've never been to the European continent. And so I'm very excited to have a reason such as this one to go experience it.
great,
So let's close with a little bit of Reiki, just as we did in the beginning, connecting through self treatment, or if it's in your practice to send distance Reiki, I invite you to, connect with us by sending Reiki to the group or perhaps to our collective highest purpose. Feel free to remain in practice as long as you wish. Feel free to remain in practice as long as you wish, as always. Um, and um, we're connected consciously and also unconsciously. And I look forward to continued connection with each of you in the year ahead. And until next time, peace, love, and Reiki.